As always, everybody, this webcast is brought to you by Black Hills Information Security. It is also brought to you by Active Countermeasures AI Hunter. By the way, the AI stands for actual intelligence, not necessarily artificial intelligence. And if at any point, I'll talk about this a little bit during the webcast as we go. If at any point you would like to have a demo, just type in demo in the window and we will work to schedule a demo with you. So the name of this webcast is You're Going to Get Hacked. It will not be over quickly. You will not enjoy it. Be prepared. Of course, the quote is from 300. And I kind of liked that quote because it kind of like breaks down, this is miserable and it's going to suck. And I'm not going to go into further detail about when that quote actually kicks off in that movie. But if you've seen the movie, you know it's basically just a really bad thing. And I wanted to walk through and do two things. One, I wanted to walk through what are the core procedures an organization should have in place whenever they're getting ready for an eventual incident that's going to happen in their organization. And kind of wanted to showcase backdoors and breaches because our next webcast that we will be doing is going to be all about how to play backdoors and breaches. And this entire webcast is going to be a card category set from backdoors and breaches itself. So there's a number of things that need to be aligned to be ready for an incident. And this is really in line of that joke you see, the only two things that are certain in life are death and taxes. And I kind of couple that with IT security. We're all in jobs and it's literally, we're the only people in the world of IT that are absolutely 100% guaranteed to fail. You're going to get compromised. There's without question going to be a breach in your organization, and it is absolutely critical that you be ready for that breach to occur, because this can really make a determination as to whether or not you're treated as a hero in your organization or you look like an absolutely bumbling idiot. And there's nothing like an incident to make you look like an absolute bumbling idiot. So almost no one ever is. And this is tied from the incidents that we work at BHIS, but also talking with other instructors and other people that I know in the industry. Somebody mentioned Dave Kennedy and the Trusted Sec team. They work incident response as well. And a lot of the same types of themes we hear whenever we're talking amongst like IANS faculty is, you know, these organizations that we do incident response for expect us to be able to say, yes, here's the hacker, and now we're putting them into prison and congratulations. And the reality of the situation is most times we have to say, look, we have no idea who actually attacked you. We have no idea if you have other systems that are compromised in your environment, because you're missing all of these different things to be able to help us answer those questions. So that creates all kinds of different tension points from the incident response team, be it a consultant or internal team, and the IT team as well. We're not going to spend a lot of time on preparation. I want to get that out of the way up front. We're not going to talk about how you should keep your systems patched and you should be up to date and your vulnerability management should be there. You're checking configurations of things, doing regular security assessments, penetration testing, lateral movement. I'm not going to talk about that. What I'm going to talk about is if there is an incident, what are some of the key things that you need to have in place to actually help you successfully work through that incident. But we also have a game, as I said. You know, we're going to talk about backdoors and breaches because it's all about that incident response mindset and what you need to do to work successfully through an incident as well. And we think it can actually help quite a bit. So let's move on and talk about a problem. This is my new go-to slide. I'm going to be running this in literally every presentation until next year when the data actually is updated. But this has really changed, honestly, I believe, for the worst. This is a Verizon data breach report. And basically, the Verizon data breach report breaks down how organizations identified that they were actually compromised. I'm going to focus kind of on the large side of the spectrum. On the large side of the spectrum, external partner monitoring service, 42%. And then everything else just drops into single digits, right? I mean, after you get through internal antivirus, employed by an employee, external customer, bam, everything else is just barely crawling out of 1%, maybe to 2%, and maybe you have unrelated third party popping to a 3%. But this shows that by and large, organizations don't have the proper technology aligned to actually deal with an incident. And even if they do have that technology, the technology isn't configured properly to be effective to actually detect and react to an incident in an organization as well. So this is absolutely horrifying to me, and I think it's also very telling about how a lot of security technologies are actually falling flat on their face. And that's really why we created RITA for network and analytics, and we're currently, somebody asked in the chat window if AI Hunter can hook into ELK, and the answer is soon, very soon, because we're going to have our own custom VM that's going to ingest Sysmon, and then we're going to correlate that with AI Hunter, but we're going to release that publicly because we're looking at this internally at BHIS and active countermeasures, and we basically say we've got to start thinking differently about a lot of these things. And there's a whole bunch of really cool projects like SoftElk and HELK by Cyber War Dog that are kind of heading in the exact same direction. But the goal is to get people thinking about things differently. So let's talk about politics and psychology. You absolutely need to have some level of psychology in play before an incident ever occurs. And this isn't so much for you personally. In many ways, me talking to a number of you here on this webcast is preaching to the choir. We're talking to other security professionals about different types of things, and everybody's going to agree. We're like, yeah, we should have this. Yes, we should have firewalls. Yes, we should have IDS and IPS and segmentation. But that's not the whole story, because when you get into an incident, if you personally are prepared for that incident, it does you absolutely no good whatsoever if the rest of the organization is not prepared for that incident. Because many people look at computer security, I'm talking about people outside of the security industry as a whole, they look at security as a state machine. Once it's secure, you keep it in a secure state, you don't have to worry about being hacked. And if you are hacked, well, you're going to blame the people that are responsible for the state machine, which are the security team. Clearly they're deficient, clearly they made a mistake, and clearly they can be blamed. So it requires you as a security professional to start spending more time interacting and working with the people in your organization to change that psychology of the people that you're working with, or sociology, I guess is what it would be at that particular point. So let me give you a couple of quick examples. If you're in charge of IT and you're working IT security in your organization, and your management comes to you and basically says, hey, did you read this article in the USA Today about this breach, about Russians or this new piece of malware or attacks on IoT or attacks against power grid, then you are failing at your job. People are getting their IT security news from Drudge Report, Huffington Post, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and they're not getting it from you. And there's this great thing I just found out the other day that I thought was really good. Michael Crichton and amnesia. He's got this this type of amnesia. So he developed this idea called the gel man amnesia. And basically, the gel man amnesia, and we won't get into the politics and all the other things associated with Michael Crichton, but the gel man amnesia basically states that as an expert, you can read an article. Let's talk about hacking. I'm sure that a number of you, when you read the newspaper and an article comes out about attacks and cyber attacks and hacking, as you're reading that article, you absolutely cringe about everything that's in the article. You're basically saying, crap, this article is horrible, it's poorly written, they got the conclusions all wrong, they technically didn't get anything correct, and you just feel horrible about the article. But then you read another article, and then you automatically trust anything associated with that article that's outside of your expertise. So if you're an expert, you read an article, you think the article associated with the area of expertise is crap, but then you read another article that's outside of your expertise, and then you think, well, this is clearly good stuff. So the problem is when people read computer security articles, they're going to believe everything that they can in those computer security articles. This is why at BHIS, it's not uncommon for us to get customers every once in a while that basically tell us, we want you to come in and look for the Apache Struts vulnerability. Well, why do you want us to look for the Apache Struts vulnerability? Because that's what got Equifax. We want to look for that vulnerability because that's what got them. So they're basically basing their perception of computer security based on what they're reading in articles, and this becomes a problem. So your job as incident responders of the future or security professionals of today is to basically go through and train people about their roles, responsibilities, and authorizations. I'm going to get that here in just a second, and walk them through scenarios so that they get more familiar about what attacks actually look like. They get more familiar about the diversity of attacks. They get more familiar about the technical controls that are in place, and they aren't just jumping to various conclusions about security. So I'll give you an example. Another one, Krebs. So so this is another big problem. So Krebs basically did this article, and he was talking about spam on a calendar in Gmail, and this is a vulnerability that we discovered back in 2017, and we released this technique, and it showed up on a number of different websites, showed up in Forbes, and the thing that's really hard is a bunch of articles came out and they said, look, this is how you stop this particular attack, and everything in this article about how to stop this attack doesn't work. We're going to talk about this at Wild West Hacking Fest. The presentation by Bo and by Mike Felch, they're going to go through and say this security that Google talked about and Krebs talked about to stop this type of attack, it does not work. And they're going to demonstrate it, and they're going to demonstrate some fairly terrifying things as well. But even if we tell our customers, look, this does not work, because it's actually been committed in an article, because it's been talked about in a public forum, because Google said this is how you fix it, and Krebs says this is how you fix it, then we're constantly fighting against that. It becomes this weird uphill battle. So you need to be that center, that point of center for security news in your organization. You need to be doing tabletop exercises, brown bags on how to protect yourself at home and at work. You need to be the person that people trust. Otherwise, they're going to be trusting third-party sources. They're going to be trusting their friend at another company, or their cousin who's really good at IT, and they're not going to be trusting you. So the tabletop exercise, especially Backdoors and Breaches, was designed to help that. Also, whenever we talk about training, we talk about roles, responsibilities, and authorizations. And I capitalized authorizations because this is oftentimes missing. So everyone knows roles and responsibilities. You're in charge of HR. You're responsible for the system in HR. So if there's an incident, you're going to be responsible for that. Maybe not, right? So the authorizations is the next step. If you're in charge of HR and you're responsible for HR, do you have the authorization to actually bring the HR system down? Do you have the authorization to delay payroll if an incident actually occurs? So people need to know what it is they can do, not just their roles and responsibilities, but what can they do without a massive amount of political blowback from the rest of the organization. So the psychology is absolutely fundamental for absolutely everything else. I want to pause for a couple seconds, folks. Do we have any red flagged questions?
The first one is, will Backdoors and Breaches be available for mail order?
Yes, January is the time frame for that. We're going to be shipping like 8,000 decks to Amazon.com here in the next couple of weeks, and it absolutely will be available for mail order.
Is there a time frame when we expect ELK to be integrated?
So as far as integration, it's super easy. With AI Hunter, you have the ability to actually generate a link, and you can click to it, and it's just super simple for us to add that in. We want to control our own ELK distribution associated with that, so we expect that that's going to take about a month. We're going to start with a very basic ELK distribution that's specifically designed for ingesting and indexing sysmon events on networking and process creation and things of that nature. So that is going to be coming out fairly shortly. But yes, that will be coming. Give us about 60 days, please.
Project Bob.
Yep, that's the name. We decided to call it Project Bob. We've got John asked a question. Would a statement of accepted risk be a good strategy to protect the IT security manager on a certain level of liability? Whatever it is you want to call it, I think it would be fine. I think it just needs to be stated up front that if they decide to make a decision, especially in the heat of a moment of an actual incident, they shouldn't be judged on that particular action as well.
Yeah, John, this goes back to our government work. We like the risk management matrix. The matrix of all your risks with your mitigations, your initial risk, your mitigated risk, and your residual risk. Have managers review that some number of times per year and sign off.
Absolutely. Brian asked, what if we're using third-party news to present information to our end users? I think that that's great. I think that that's a really, really good, solid approach. But you have to be the filter to explain what that news actually means. Okay. So you can absolutely use that third-party resources for your news as well. If you have the responsibility of security but not the authority, then you're there to be blamed when things go wrong. I love that quote. Great quote, Mark. I have no clue. Would you click this URL for me? No. Microsoft Bob will be an actual lawsuit. That's right. I think that Bill Gates and actually Melinda Gates was one of the project managers on Microsoft Bob. But we're going to go through. Let me keep moving on this, and I'll pause here in a second. So let's get started. So server analysis. So I took all of the cards, the procedure cards from Backdoors and Breaches, and I broke them down into their own slide. So each of these represents what the card looks like, and it doesn't say prototype in the final cards. And there may be some spellings and some typos because, hey, it's me, and that's just kind of the way I roll, and you should all know that by now. But server analysis, the ability to baseline and verify in a system is operating in a normal state. And this is more than just running task manager and looking for evil backdoor.exe. And there's some tools that are designed for actually helping for this. Deep Blue CLI is a great tool by Eric Conrad. And then also the SANS analysis cheat sheets. SANS has released a whole bunch of different cheat sheets for Linux and for Windows-based systems. And you can look at this in a couple of different ways. One, you can look at it as these are some of the core commands and some of the core skills that any incident responder should be able to actually run through. And that's amazing. But we have some points of differentiation. First, servers are fundamentally different from workstations. They have completely different roles. And one of the things that I recommend you do with any cheat sheet is you'll have a cheat sheet that'll say, here's how you identify the running processes. Here's how you identify the open network connections. Here's the critical security configuration files on the system. And that's operating system specific. But you can take every one of those each one of those different cheat sheets, and you can instead apply it for the applications on the server. Now, many times you're gonna have to build this yourself. So if you're working with an Oracle database, right? So what is the actual like $$ parameter table? What is a init.ora file for initializing the Oracle database? What are the default ports that should be used for the Oracle database? Is it listening on port 8080 or 8888 for any management services for additional third-party software? But you're going to take that same mindset of what you would do for just the operating system, and you're going to apply it to the applications. So the processes, the users, the files, the network connections. Take that same concept for the OS, and you're going to create a separate cheat sheet that specifically exists for the server itself. So critical files and configurations, normal access to applications, and all of this, just so you know, absolutely can apply to the cloud as well. So somebody wanted me to repeat my comment on Eric Conrad. Eric Conrad wrote the tool Deep Blue CLI, which is a fantastic utility for allowing you to look at workstations and servers, specifically looking at the event logs for PowerShell and command line logging. So I'll just keep going. So there was something like, dozens of ports that were, or dozens of vulnerabilities and a whole handful of ports that were open as well. And the thing that's horrible about that is a lot of people just spin that up in the cloud and walk away. They won't actually baseline the configuration. They won't baseline the ports and services that are actually being used. And of course, this opens it up to massive security vulnerabilities. So basically, you'll baseline the operating system. That's fine. But then you're going to take those same baseline concepts for network connections, for the open ports, for the files and the users, and you're going to create your own cheat sheet for the server itself. Where are the logs for the server? What are the critical configuration files for the server? And so on. And this will many times be very unique to the application stack that you're using. And many times the applications may be even custom. And this may lead back into additional conversations with developers to make sure that they're actually implementing the proper logging for those applications. So let's, before I move on, any questions on this, folks?
Is Deep Blue CLI mainly useful if you lack EDR? What problem does it solve that EDR cannot?
So whenever you're looking at something like EDR, there is always the issue of bypassing those products. So there's been a number of different bypass techniques over the years. One of the bypass techniques that I saw recently that I thought was really lame was just shutting the EDR off. okay, I guess. Some more interesting ones would be actually migrating into the EDR process, and some of the EDRs that are out there. Carbon Black had this problem and they fixed it years ago. But for many of the products, if you migrate into the process itself, it goes completely blind because it can't watch itself, watching itself, watch itself. It just doesn't work that way. And also some processes are off limits to some EDR, so you can migrate into those processes. Also, we have some techniques like Windows Notification Framework, with some techniques that we released last year at Wild West Hack and Fest in the Pen Test Mystery Box that'll bypass some of the logging in those products as well. So basically, you're making an assumption that at some point that EDR is going to fail, and having a second or a third opinion is very, very powerful. So instead of saying, here's one tool that'll detect everything, that's wrong. Say that we have multiple tools that'll actually overlap, correlate, bolster, and support each other. So it's not like, hey, this is the one situation where something like Deep Blue CLI is going to work. It's basically another great trick to have in your bag if you get into an incident. Because if you're looking at many of the organizations that get hit by ransomware, they are running advanced EDR, absolutely. But if you can couple that with something like server analysis, then you have 2 points of reference that you can actually tie it together. So that's cool. Also, kind of on that question, Brader said, during IR, would you prefer EDR over Windows events? I would like both, honestly. So we can't get into a situation where you're going to say, this is always the magical tool, or this is the best tool. Have multiple different tools to actually help as well. Since you're going to be using out, do you plan to adhere to Elastin Common Schema? I don't even know what that is, but yeah, of course. Chris, take a note on what the Elastic Common Schema is. But we'll try to do our best to make sure it's set up that way. No, we would. Yeah, go ahead.
John, one other question. It's where would you store this cheat sheet? But before you answer, I want to answer.
Everywhere. Oh, go ahead.
We had a person come up to us at a booth one time and said they used their cheat sheets at the urinals and the stalls in their bathrooms. Like they put them up there so that way it was that's how people like read while they were, you know.
Wow, that's pretty cool. On the back of the doors and all of that, it's like, here's the command of the day. You could do some really good user awareness training just by putting interesting articles in the backs of the doors.
True multitasking.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. People got to read, right? People got to read.
Yeah.
All right, let's get off of bathroom talk. So yes, but I would say cheat sheets everywhere. Get everyone trained so they know how to use those cheat sheets. And by the way, these are procedure cards. So when you're playing backdoors and breaches, we assume that these procedures exist in an organization. They're properly documented in an organization and vetted as well. So let's talk about SIEM since we are talking about ELK quite a bit. This is difficult for me because basically I've been saying that SIEM is fundamentally broken for quite a while. And if I go back a number of slides, you're going to see that, yes, SIEM is broken. Over here, log review, internal log review overall is 1.3% of all incidents are detected with the SIEM. Small organizations, it's 1%, and large organizations, it's 2.2. And I like to put this up and tap it because people will say, but SIEM, if it's done correctly, can work really, really well. Yeah, but this means you're looking at like 97.8% of the time, it's not set up correctly. So we have to find a better way of actually doing SIEM in an organization as well. So a couple of things. One, we're huge fans, as I mentioned, of Sysmon. It's getting ridiculous, but Sysmon is literally the first time a number of us in this industry have actually seen logging at the level that we wanted. I want to know the executable it ran. I want to know who ran it, where did it run from, what's the hash of that executable, what's the port and the protocol that executable utilized. You get that with Sysmon, and that's amazing, right? But the traditional SIEM techniques that are out there today, they're like this weird kind of decoder ring, right? So if you're looking at security policy changes, you're going to look in the event logs for invoke privilege use by John Strand, and then you're going to check the system ID and see that the system ID actually made a change to security policy because John doesn't make a change to security policy. No, system does on John Strand's behalf. John actually invokes privilege use. And this is just one stupid example that I use again and again, but it actually shows up again and again and again. even things that should be really easy, like password spraying detection. If you don't actually have your SIEM configured properly, you're going to miss it. You're not going to capture the corrective event IDs, or you're not going to capture the proper data in the event IDs. So this is really rough, right? And many people just throw data into a SIEM because compliance says thou shalt have a SIEM. But let's change the conversation into, what are we logging, and are we logging the right things, right? So JP Cert helps out a lot. JP Cert has this tools analysis result sheet. You can see on the bottom of the card, and that's where JP Cert went through a whole bunch of different tools and techniques that attackers use and pen testers use, and they mapped specifically what that particular tool did. So if we go to JP Cert tool analysis, you can jump in. Here we go. And you have a whole bunch of different commands. So it's not just specific malware, but it's also getting into different types of malware, the processes, LSAS, RDP connections, what different scans look like as well. And they're collecting all of the information associated with each of them. So if you're looking at PS exec, it basically says, here's the ports that'll be used in PS exec. And then it'll also give you what are the different event IDs that will be generated. So you can see, what does Sysmon generate whenever somebody is using PS exec? It's going to be event ID 1 for process create. It's also going to do event ID 3 for network connection, and event ID 13 for registry value. And in your security event log, it's going to generate an event 4689 for process termination whenever you actually do PS exec. So that's interesting. It's not actually generating an event saying, hey, it started, but it says it executed and it exited, which is insane, but that's just the way it runs. So now we can kind of take a step back, and we could say, okay, we have a better idea of the specific event IDs that we should be focusing in on, the possible registry keys that we should be looking at, instead of trying to log absolutely everything. So one of the questions I always get to people is, what are you logging? And that develops a whole bunch of additional other questions. What are you logging? What percentage of those event logs are correlated with a specific alert or report? And how much of the other stuff you're logging has nothing associated with security? It'll never be alerted on, never be reported on. And in most organizations, between 90 and 95% of the event logs that they're capturing and they're processing are complete garbage. They're never going to be used for a security incident. They're never going to be used for anything. They're just going to go into a data lake and eventually into a data ocean. And I don't know what would be larger than a data ocean, right? But you're logging a whole bunch of data because that's what your SIEM vendor tells you to log, and the SIEM vendor charges you based on the amount of data that you log. And that's the problem, right? So if we can get into the right things, with things like JP Cert, if we can get into Sysmon, where we're generating fewer event logs, we can actually drive that a little bit better into our SIEM, because the less white noise that you have in your organization, the easier it is to be able to find the actual attack. Otherwise, we get caught into a trap where we don't know what an attack looks like. We don't have things like JP Cert to tell us what we should be logging for specific types of attacks and what types of event IDs will be utilized in these particular types of attacks. So then we just default to logging everything. If we don't know what we need to log, logging everything will make sure that we're okay. But if you dig deep, you'll find out that that's garbage, because you need to not just log the proper event IDs, but you have to have the proper configurations for those event IDs to log the data you need. So this gets out of hand quickly. So it requires you to have a better understanding of the attacks, a better understanding of the artifacts that'll be generated, and clean up that signal to noise ratio in your SIEM. So any questions on this before I move on to the next one?
Yeah, John, a couple things about WEF and WEC. Does Sysmon, how does that work with that? Does Sysmon alleviate the need to use WEF and WEC? Just
Windows event forwarding?
Yeah.
No, you can actually use a Windows event forwarding with Sysmon. You can absolutely do that. If the way we're going to set it up with our elk stack, we're not going to use Windows event forwarding. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting up Elasticsearch and Logstash. They have the capability to actually send those alerts or send those event logs with WinLogBeat. So basically it'll watch the event logs and automatically forward them off of the computer system and send that to an elk stack. So yeah, that would be different. That would be different. So, oh my God, Will, I got to point out, Will said larger than a data ocean is a data world. now with Kevin Costner. Awesome. Well played, sir. What else?
Linux equivalent for sysmon?
You know what? Somebody mentioned that. Chris, what would you say would be the absolute equivalent of sysmon? I was going to say strace, uh, but strace might be a little bit insane. But yeah, I don't know off the top of my head which it would actually match up cleanly to sysmon. I think you can
Yeah, I'm
tie
not.
a bunch of stuff together.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure there. I'm not sure there is one. If somebody knows of one, hey, throw it in the notes. I'd love to kind of go in and play around with that. But that is one of the things we've been kind of challenged with is what do we have on the Linux side that doesn't require you to write a cron job that
Well,
runs it every half second to get some data?
well, you could look at something like OS query, and you could look something at like OSM maybe. I don't know. I think that there's some different things that are there, but I think you're querying it constantly. OS query is awesome, but it's one of those things that you have to fire off. You have to fire off regularly. And OSSec, just so you know, I had a bunch of people mention OSSec. OSSec will actually watch the event logs and it'll generate specific events on, new users and things of that nature. But I don't think it goes into the level of detail as you would get with sysmon as well. And yeah, you got SE Linux and GRSec are two additional tools, but once again, I don't know. Sysdig, possibly. This is probably one of those things eventually we'll unleash the Stearns on, and I'm sure that he can come up with something fairly quickly that'll be able to do that as well. All right, so that's SIEM. Let's move on to firewall logs. So I would like to say that firewall logs by and large are garbage. It's kind of like the Windows firewall is absolute complete crap. NetSH ADV firewall is garbage. It was designed by a bunch of people that had an idea what a firewall maybe was. They threw a bunch of poop on a wall and then they wrote code to match what they had on the wall. And as bad as it is, turn it on. It's still much, much, much better than not having a firewall on your host. And when you're looking at network firewall logs, yeah, you need to have the skills to be able to analyze whatever crap net flow comes off of your firewall to be able to answer some basic questions. How many hit this IP address? If it's one system, is it 12 systems? Is it 22 systems? We need to be able to answer those questions. When was the connection first made? If we saw that there was command and control, we could have the ability to actually go back and say, okay, well, we see this net flow log and we see that this particular external IP address was first accessed a week and a half ago. Great. Can we block it? Yeah, you're going to need your firewall logs to make sure you're blocking the right things as well. And firewalls, aside from firewall log review, they make great choke points, right? If you have to take an immediate triage position, and we'll talk about segmentation here in a couple of minutes, then firewalls are going to be those things that you use. But when you're setting up the firewall and you're going to use it as a choke point, you need to be able to set up and log properly so that you can be sure that you're making the right rule in the firewall in the right place. And I'll talk about this more here in just a few moments as well. It's critical to know how to use them properly, right? So let's talk about Zeek and RITA, something we talk about constantly. Just an amazing amount of, I think, an amazing amount of research that we've put into it to kind of take the idea of network traffic analytics to that next level. So we can actually do beaconing analysis. We can see what's leaving your environment and see if it actually matches profiles of non-human traffic that's leaving the environment. And RITA is free. Right, RITA is absolutely free. It's awesome. I'm very, very, very biased, but there's a number of breaches that have happened that have kind of reaffirmed why this is important. You have the nuance attack, you have the team viewer attack, you have RDP. There was recently a ransomware in a hospital in Wyoming where we believe that they were compromised through an open RDP session. And honestly, RITA is great at detecting these weird things that are running around in your environment. And you might even be able to detect a backup malware C2 server. So we were working an incident a while ago, and we were able to easily find the command and control server, but we also saw that there were 4 other systems that were beaconing like once a day to the exact same IP address, and those were backup systems. As this applies for incident response and working through an incident, now we can say, okay, well, we got a beacon from this system, but here we got 4 other systems that are making a connection as well. So it's lots and lots of digging. It's a great opportunity for you to learn what's normal in your environment, what's abnormal. We've talked about it extensively. You can set it up and get it running. and Ubuntu 16.04. I think we're moving to 18.04 here shortly. We have instructions for getting it running on Security Onion. It's just cool, guys. You need to look at it. And when we're working incident response, do we have a screenshot, Chris, of the report that we found where we were working an incident? We sanitized it, but we ended up finding like 10, 15 types of malware and crypto miners and all kinds of things in the environment. But it's crazy what you can find out once you start doing this type of analysis using something like Zeek coupled with something like RITA. It really just makes everything so much faster and easier to answer questions. Speaking of questions, do we have any more questions for me to answer?
Someone asked us so I'm putting the links to RITA in the chat. I put links to your original Getting Started with Sysmon blog in the chat. And then someone just asked about our free network threat hunting training that we have available at activecountermeasures.com/thunt.
Okay, cool. So if we could share that link out with everybody, that'd be cool, because it's a lot of awareness is what we're working on.
Yeah.
We also asked if we could get a white paper for the recommendations of SIEM ingestion from an IR point of view. If you go back a couple of slides here where I talked about JP cert at the bottom of this card with the tool analysis result sheet, let me just copy that and I'll throw it in. This would be the closest thing that you would get to that. And this would give you full breakdown of the different tools and what they generate from an IR perspective to help clean up your SIEM as well. Another one, do you happen to have pictures of logs of the found malware CNC that can be shared? We're sanitizing that report right now, and I think we have a screenshot of the findings. We might be able to share that here by the end of the webcast, but I don't want people to jump the gun and accidentally share information about a customer. So good question. All right, let's talk about segmentation. So with segmentation, this is actually different than host isolation. We created two separate cards because I've had situations where I've had to firewall off entire network segments, and that's usually what happens whenever you have a worm going through an environment or malware, something like double pulsar or Petya, not Petya, WannaCry, something that's crawling through your entire organization. You have multiple systems are compromised, and you honestly don't know which system in a network segment is compromised. You can just shut that entire segment off. It's kind of like those horrible zombie movies, like 28 Days Later and 28 weeks later, where it's just horrifying, where there's times where you have the zombies are intermixed with people that are not zombies yet. You honestly don't know who's who. The zombie ravenous horde is coming through, and usually the protagonists in the story just end up shutting and locking a door because they don't know who's good, who's bad, who's infected, who's not infected. You can't, if you leave it open to try to sort it out, you're dead. So shut the whole thing off. That is absolutely a skill set when you're dealing with worm and bot outbreaks in your organizations, that you need to be able to segment out that entire organizational segment, whether it's like in Aurora, Colorado, or it's part of people down in Miami, Florida. We know that that particular network segment is hostile, shut it down. I've seen this mostly used recently, aside from your general malware and ransomware outbreaks. Believe it or not, I've seen a number of companies recently, they've gotten indications of hacking from their Chinese offices. So they'll have business partners or they'll have offices in China, and they start seeing attacks come through. And the only thing that they can do at that point is just shut everything down. Now, your team needs to have the ability to be able to shut off those segments and shut off those segments quickly. So if we're looking at it, you don't want to be sitting and Googling how to do firewall segmentation in the middle of an incident. And also where you make the segmentation matters. Recently, we had an interesting situation. We actually had a Nessa scan that was over a very, very small link between New York City and Amsterdam. And what happened is it was saturating this link. And what the customer did is put in a firewall rule to try to block our individual scanning system, but they put it on the other side of that connection. So the scan was still saturating that entire firewall. So knowing your segmentation and saying, okay, the attack is starting in New York, we can segment off in New York, make sure that it doesn't oversaturate a pipe going into Amsterdam or into New York City or into like Miami or wherever is really, really important. So knowing where your firewalls are, the proper commands that you would run to actually create those temporary firewall rule sets. And if you if you really want to get crafty, you can actually get to protocols. So if you have something that's spreading through RPC, you know, something like port 445 on an environment, you could create a firewall rule that says, well, we know there's malware spreading. We've got the zombie horde is spreading on port 445. So we're just going to block port 445 from that infected network segment. That's getting pretty crafty, and that's probably a little bit better than just simply blocking off an entire network segment wholesale. But you need to have the skill set to be able to do that. You need to drill to be able to do that. You need to make sure that your security team and your network administrators know what they're doing to actually do that effectively. So I want to pause again. Any other questions so far? Oh, here's a good one from James. He said, we've used this control to automate a location and VLAN kill on a switch. Scary, but thankfully we've only had to do it once. But I'm willing to bet, James, that you're really happy that you knew how to actually do it in that particular segment. I'm going to mispronounce your name, and I apologize profusely, but Opsalem, if I mispronounce it, I apologize, said, what do you think about zero trust? I think that zero trust helps a lot with this, but that's basically, we'll talk about isolation. That's where your internal hosts treat the internal network as hostile and other hosts as hostile all the time. So you're constantly on that defensive footing. And I love that. I think that that's really, really cool as well. Antonio said zero trust is a pipe dream. I disagree. I think that what we're moving into, Antonio, and it's just a matter of time, I think, is you're getting to the point where the network is just power and pipe, right? You're able to get onto a network, and then everything you access is in the cloud, and basically every network segment in every company is like the equivalent of a Starbucks. You're merely giving people connectivity so they can connect out into the cloud. You don't trust anything on the network itself. So I believe that that's where we're heading, but honestly, we've got a while before we actually get there as well. What is the negative impact of blocking 445 from an operational perspective? A lot of your Active Directory syncing services that I'll be accessing your workstations will actually not work. So going back to that firewall rule, you're going to want to have the ability to put in those rule sets and possibly still allow your management infrastructure to access those ports as well. Yeah, so this is worst case scenario. Thanks, CJ. So this is us doing a hunt where we found a couple of systems that were compromised, and this is what it led to. This is what RITA actually did for us. So we initially found Conficker, because that's super easy to find. And then we were finding double pulsar, we were finding Nitol Trojan, Ramit Trojan, UT Trojan, Votwac, CPU miner, and this almost gets ridiculous, right? Where you start looking into an environment from a network perspective, trying to detect malware, and then you end up finding 4 or 5 other instances of malware that are in the organization as well. So that's what that looks like in a hunt team that happens as well. So thank you for finding that. And pretty soon, hopefully, we'll have a complete sanitized report of what that looks like. All right, endpoint protection review. So a number of you brought up a little bit earlier, you were talking about checking logs versus checking endpoint. So we actually, somebody said no Morris worm. I'm disappointed. Thanks, Mark. That's pretty good. So what happens is, it's kind of, I talked about it earlier, you want to have multiple overlapping fields of visibility. You want to have the event logs, you want to have things like sysmon, but you also want to be trained in how to review the endpoint protection in your environment. So if you're looking at something like Cylance or CrowdStrike or Carbon Black or any of those advanced tools, it isn't just enough to have those tools in your environment. You need to have the actual technical skills to be able to work with those tools and query them properly. So if you have a particular executable, you have a particular program, it's communicating to a certain IP address, how do you actually use that product to actually query that across the entire environment? So one of the traps that we see people fall into very regularly is they'll have endpoint, but they don't check the logs, or the logs are sending out emails, but they create a filter rule that drops it into a folder and they check it on Friday. And it's funny because we'll have times where we try multiple times to get into an organization. Finally, we're successful. And they're like, oh, well, let me check my logs after we're in, after we've submitted the report. And they'll be like, I'll be darned. There's the alerts associated with your stager. Ha, we should have seen that. Yeah. So it goes deeper than just having AV. It goes into how do you actually use your AV in such a way where it's an effective tool for incident response whenever you actually do get compromised as well. So another question that I saw show up, how well do you see carbon black protection being used? So here's the deal. Whenever you're looking at any of these products, it's not, the actual product itself isn't nearly as important as how that product is actually configured. So you can have an amazing product, Silence, Carbon Black, CrowdStrike, whatever, but you can shoot yourself in the foot by shutting off, like, you know, high enforcement mode or whitelisting capabilities. And then it's just the heuristics, which tend to be a little bit of garbage in our opinion. So you can absolutely take the amazing tool and you can reduce its effectiveness very, very quickly. We've seen customers that have to use PowerShell rather than locking down and using code signing certificates or allowing PowerShell to run from specific locations. They're just like, I know we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on Silence, but hey, let's just fire up and let PowerShell run from anywhere. That blows a hole right through the middle of those tools. So it has more to do with configuration than it is the specific tool itself. All right, so user behavioral and entity analytics. On user behavioral and entity analytics, you it's kind of a two-edged sword. And this really bothers me because I talk to many people in security, especially when you're talking about RITA or you're talking about SIEM or you're talking about UBEA, and they freak out. They're like, yeah, false positives, too many false positives. Every single good security product will have to be tuned. There's no such thing as a product that you just drop into your environment and then magical unicorn farts happen and Skittles show up everywhere. It doesn't work that way. Honestly, if we had a product like that, all of us would be out of jobs. So the fact that these tools are hard to configure in your environment, you know, take pride in the fact that you work in security and be happy that you don't always hit the easy button. Thanks, CJ. So, you know, we got to get around this concept of false positives and we've got to get into tuning. All of these products require you to actually tune your process, tune your servers, train your analysis. So most of these tools, the way they work is they'll do a stacked analysis. And what that means is it'll do a count. So for every failed login attempt, it's going to generate a count associated with a specific user account or a workstation. For every successful logon account to a different resource, it'll do a positive count for that user. So if you have a user that's logged on to multiple systems, it's going to set the counter off the charts and you're going to get an alert. But the user behavioral and entity analytics is one of those things that is very effective at detecting many penetration testers. It is very common for us, once we get on a system, use something like domain password spray, and all of a sudden UBEA lights up. That's good, right? If you're doing a purple team, you want to make sure that those products and those things are actually functioning the way that they should. Don't just turn it on and say, oh my God, we've got 100 alerts on this thing, and we've got all these service accounts, and it's going to take us like 3-4 hours to go through all of this. It would be much better if we complained about it for weeks and complained to the vendor about the false positives than it would be just to actually start digging through what are the alerts that are being generated. You know, just setting up system accounts and service accounts, identifying those service accounts by names, putting in the proper filtering on those service accounts is a much better approach. Really good security teams are good not because they bought a product, but they're really good because they've tuned their product and they've learned how their product actually works as well. Endpoint analysis, this is similar to server analysis, but it's also different, right? We still go back to those cheat sheets. You're going to have cheat sheets from places like SANS. You can use tools like Deep Blue CLI. You can use Sysmon, PowerShell, command line logging, establishing baselines, and then practice utilizing those baselines. I might share out an executable. Mark Baggett created an executable for us for SANS 504, where it emulates what malware does on a system, and it asks you questions. It basically says, hey, malware just started up a listening port on the system. What is that port? What is the process ID? What is the parent process ID? If you connect to the port that this particular backdoor is listening on, what is the string of characters that it sends you? When it executed, what is the string of characters that are base 64 encoded that you've got to decode? It'll ask you all these questions, and it'll help you get better at actually looking at operating systems and doing that analysis. So I'll be sure to get that to Jason, and we'll load it into the folder with the slides, so you'll be able to get that executable. I think it's already out in the folder. We just got to move it to the proper location. But that's all part of SANS 504. That's what we teach, and we actually have released it a number of times open to the public, but it'll get you better at that endpoint analysis. Because if you get into the first question, it's like, what port is this listening on? And you're like, oh, I don't know. How do I know what ports are listening on my computer system? You don't understand things like netstat minus NAOB. You don't understand, how we can identify different command line invocations using WMIC or task list. So it'll help you get better at those skills as well. So crisis management. All right, this is not technical, but I think it's really important. From crisis management, what are the types of things that would happen in your organization that you would need to bring in a crisis management team? Now, this could be the lawyers, it could be the executives. Odds are it's not going to be the techs in your organization. It's more than likely it is going to be higher level management. But you need to sit down, and that's kind of backdoors and breaches in the way that we created it. How do you handle something if it's a public breach? If you go back to the Verizon data breach report, a tremendous number of breaches are found by public disclosures. All of a sudden, the data showed up on Pastebin. How does your organization handle that? You have legal requirements to notify. Many techs and incident responders have no idea. Whenever it says that there's a legal response to notify, how do we notify? If it's GDPR, how do we deal with that? If it's health data, who do we notify in the event of a health, HIPAA violation or high tech violation? Yeah, lawyers need to be involved. How do you coordinate with the FBI and Secret Service? Dealing with all of a sudden it shows up on Krebs's website, and it's now, well, your organization has exposed 100 million accounts. How are you going to handle that? And I really think you can look at previous case studies and how bad organizations have actually handled that over the years. If you're looking at something like Equifax, that's a horrible way to actually work through an incident as well. It really is something that you have to have a different skill set. Mark just brought that up. Crisis management is lawyer spokesperson domain. It absolutely is. And it's absolutely critical that your team get primed, and you're going to support them on the technical side without questions. You're absolutely going to support them, but that requires everyone actually working together. Isolation, this is different than actually segmentation. Remember, segmentation is stopping the zombie hordes. With isolation, you have one system. You have one system that is compromised, and you are going to isolate that single computer. Now, this could be done on the switch by locking down that switch port. And you could maybe even do it on the host-based firewall itself, but there's a number of different ways that you can actually do this segmentation on a wide-scale basis or on an individual kind of sniper basis as well. But this can be done in multiple levels, much like segmentation. How do you want to go? Do you want to lock out that user account? Do you want to sandbox that particular computer system? So it's still on a network, but it's not the production network. Or do you want to set up something like an upside down turnet where you can have a VLAN that matches the VLAN in your organization, has a whole bunch of different honeypots, a whole bunch of different services. You have tools like Symmetria that create breadcrumbs that, like Maze Runner, will basically focus the attackers into a place where you want them to be. So it can go anywhere from just simply knocking it off the network to actually tracking what the attacker would do on your environment as well. So there's a number of different options that you can actually do in your environment. And somebody just asked, how do you isolate a compromised system if you're with a managed network provider? That usually is going to require you to coordinate with that actual managed provider. And I'd recommend testing them on it. Call them up and say, hey, we have this workstation, it's at this IP address. Can you please lock it out of the network? And see how long it takes them to actually do that. So let's talk about inject cards. I have a handful of inject cards that I wanted to throw at you. And these are all part of the game, backdoors and breaches. So we have two cards that are designed for shutting up that one person in the organization that answers all the questions. Anytime you're playing a tabletop exercise, anytime you're working an incident, there's always going to be that one person, and that one person answers the questions for everybody, knows where everything is at, has the technical know-how for the entire organization. And in our game, we have two cards to remove that person. So the lead handler takes maternity or paternity leave. The legal takes your only skilled incident handler into a meeting to explain the incident, and that neutralizes that person. So in this game, if you have that one person, everyone in the room will look at the Bob and they'll say, Bob, you can't talk anymore. See how the rest of your organization handles an incident if you lose that one key person. And you'd be surprised. Many organizations just disintegrate. One of the regrets that I have in my life, I was that person for Department of Interior when I was working at Accenture. And my daughter was born, so my first child. And people talk about the miracle of life. And, it's like, oh, it's so magical. I just know that there's a lot of blood in childbirth. And I remember I had blood all over me. I had it like on my face. I had it on my shirt. And my daughter was born, took her, gave her her first bath, and was there because I was afraid the hospital was going to lose my kid, switched at birth type scenario. So kid wasn't going to leave my sight. And I finally get back to the room with my wife. We sit down, and she's got Lauren, and she's trying to breastfeed, and that's almost impossible for new mothers in many situations. And I get a call. From my boss, and he's like, hey, we have an incident and we need you to get down here right now. I'm like, well, my wife just literally gave birth, and I don't know if I should leave. And he was very emphatic. He's like, no, you're the only one that knows how to do any of this stuff. You need to get down here right now. So I show up, and I'm in jeans and a t-shirt, and I have blood all over me. And I remember my boss looked at me and he's like, this is not appropriate dress. Like, you don't show up to work covered in blood. And I was like, seriously, dude, I literally came here straight from the hospital. Like, my wife just gave birth like an hour and a half ago. That company or that particular organization I was working with had no idea how to handle an incident without me. So that was really, I kind of dug in, and I wanted to train everyone so that would never happen to me again for my subsequent children that I eventually had. But your company has to know how to deal with an incident if they lose that person. And many times you'll just see the entire group just disintegrate. And that's why this card is pulled. And whenever I play this game with people, I will have the one person that's answering all the questions and just silence that one person. A quick note on murder. So Bobby the intern kills the system you're reviewing. So it's not just Bobby the intern, it could be anybody. But if you have someone while you're working an incident that actually loses a point of evidence, somebody was talking about EDR. Well, what happens if you're doing analysis and forensics analysis, you're pulling CAPE data off of a workstation for forensics artifacts, and then in the middle of pulling the forensics artifacts, boom, the network connection goes away because the system was shut down. How do you handle that? If you don't have those kind of overlapping fields of visibility from a network analysis, SIEM analysis, sysmon analysis, then if you lose that system, then you've lost all visibility into that system, and that can get you into trouble very, very, very quickly. So we've got a minute left for questions. This went a little bit longer than I wanted. I like Jason. He said, "Yeah, sorry, I quit. No, I'm gone." So any questions on that at all?
I think you covered almost all of them during, or we responded to them at some point.
Woo!
So
Awesome.
we're good.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, folks. So with that, I want to say thank you very much. Does Bob ever survive? The answer is no. Bob never survives. So thank you so much, everyone. And we'll see you guys on the next webcast, where we're going to get in detail on how to play this game. And we're going to play a couple of rounds of this card game with everybody.